JC Smith here. Today I was headed out with the Dodge. I was getting ready to get on the expressway, and I come around the corner, and it just shut off. It's like he's cut the key off. Like he turned the key off and shut the engine off. I don't know what's going on. It's the first breakdown that left me stranded I've had in over 6 years, as far as I can remember. So I called a friend of mine. He come get me and took me home. I got the Freightliner now. You can see him. I'm going to go up there and get it winched up on the truck, get it back home, figure out what's going on. Kind of odd thing. I've been getting the water in the fuel light coming on every now and then, so I stop immediately, and I've been draining the water out, but I don't know if there's a problem with the fuel pump or what's going on, but I'll bring you along.
Hey guys, Mr. and Mrs. JC here today. So we were on our way somewhere, and we turned the corner to get on the highway, and the truck just stalled and it won't start. So one of his friends took him back home to get the Freightliner, and we're going to load it up, so I have to go in and steer the truck. I'll be right back. Okay. Trying to steer with one hand. It's a fuel problem. We did get some bad fuel, some water in the fuel in West Virginia, and he's been draining it out ever since when the light comes on, but then all of a sudden there's something more serious. It's getting fuel, he thinks, but yeah, I'm not sure. He'll have to explain it. This is scary. I hate doing this. Is that good? Okay. Guess I gotta put the windows up. Alright, I'll bring you back because I have to try to get out of here.
Okay, we got it back, got it unloaded. First thing I did was hit it with the scanner. I put the scanner on it, it showed P0087, which is low pressure, rail pressure. So, several ways to do that. We want to test for fuel pressure after the fuel filter, and make sure we got 10 to 15 pounds getting to the CP3. Well, I went to go check that filter because we had already had a water and fuel problem. The light had come on after we had gotten fuel in West Virginia one time, and we'd been getting this water and fuel light every so often. I just kept draining it. Well, once we got back from West Virginia, I went ahead and filled it up again. And because we were taking a trip to the truck show, I went ahead and filled it all up, and I put some additive in the tank to do away with that. And long story short, I pulled the fuel filter out, and it was real slimy, and it looked like it was just saturated in water. So I got a sample from the fuel tank up front, and it looked the same. So it just, I couldn't pump enough to get the water out. So I decided it was best to go ahead and drop the tank, which is why the truck's in the air right now. So I went to go drop the tank, and like I said, we've been fighting this water and fuel ever since we went to West Virginia. And I remembered that when we filled up in West Virginia, right after we filled up, we were driving around and we kept smelling diesel fuel, and I looked underneath it and there was no leaks anywhere. And I'd kind of forgot about that until I went to go drop the tank. So we dropped the tank. I've got the sending unit out now because we completely pumped it out and cleaned the tank out. And here's the fuel pump. We're going to go ahead and replace it because it's, 8 years old, and I've got it out, and the pickup screen's got a bunch of crud down in there. I could clean it, but I plan on keeping this truck, so we're just going to replace it. But this is what I took out for diesel fuel. This is water saturated diesel. I got about 16 gallons of diesel here, and as soon as I started pumping this out and I went to go take the tank down, I realized what the problem was. This truck, I come over here to disconnect this is a fill line. Well, it's got this tube in here, this insert, and it's got two hoses that come up here. Those two hoses are cut right there and open. When I pulled them down, they were full of water. So what was happening was, as the bed of the truck, when it was parked nose downhill, the water would fill this part of the bed and run down them tubes right into my fuel tank. So that's how we're getting water in the fuel. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that fuel pump. I've got a fuel filter on order. I had it ordered already, it just hasn't showed up yet. We're going to put the fuel pump in, put the tank back in. I'm going to flush the lines out. I will replace the fuel filter, get it primed, see if it'll start. If it does, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with that. If not, and if it runs good. Now, if it's still giving me that P0087, which is the fuel rail pressure, is too low, I'm probably going to have to put a CP3 in it. I hope that's not the case, but if it is, it is. It's an expensive mistake, because I forgot all about those, because I had seen them hoses coming up in the bed, and kind of like just kind of forgot about it, and now it's a very expensive mistake for me. So once we get it, we'll bring you guys along and see if that takes care of the problem. But as of right now, that's all we got, and hopefully we don't need a CP3. But it's sure, more than likely, I'm not going to trust that CP3 now. So we'll see what happens. I'll bring you guys along. Alright, we got the fuel tank back in, fuel pump's in, we got the fuel lines flushed out, and now I'm filling up with some good clean diesel fuel. Let's see how far we are. I think that hose is like 25 feet, something like that. Let's see. There you go, that'll be enough. About a half tank. Okay, go shut it off. I don't want to go too much, just in case we have to take the tank back down for any reason, which we shouldn't. And I've looped that drain off. That extra 2 fills in the vent. So, all right, let's get the fuel filter in. Okay, so I'm going to pull all the towels off here. It's been really humid, and I laid these rags over top of the engine once I pulled the injectors out, and it's a good thing because I'd had all that condensation in here. So I'm going to start one by one. I'm going to start with number 1. You can see there's an index, a keyway right here. That corresponds with a roll pin in the injector. So we'll pull all this protective garb off. Make sure the copper washer's on there. I've already made sure that the copper washer is not down in the hole. I'm going to lube that O-ring a little bit with some light motor oil. Just a little bit of oil here. These only go one way because of connector tube, okay? So they've got to go in that same direction. So you're going to push them down in there. Kind of line that keyway up to where it's pointing at the bolt hole, and just give it a good push. Okay. And take your retainer. What I want to do is pull the bolts out, turn this back and forth until that retainer falls down in there good. I'm kind of running out of time here because I'm leaving for vacation in a couple days, and I just can't wait any longer because I need to get this thing done, and I need to drive around town, make sure everything is good. Now that keyway with that roll pin on the injector is what's going to help line it up for your fuel feed tube. It's very important that it's right, and we'll be doing a torque sequence, a two-step, so that we'll be torquing it down to a small amount and then putting the fuel feed tube in, torquing it just a little bit so that torque feed tube, if it needs to move just a little bit, the injector, if it needs to move, it can do that. And don't take for granted just because there's a copper washer on your injector you take out. Don't take that for granted that that's all there is, because I've seen several times where I'll go to take an injector out and I'll pull the injector out, see the copper washer, I'll take a flashlight, I'll look down in there, and there's another one in there. It's happened before. So you want to be sure that you never know when someone else has been in behind you and wasn't as thorough as they needed to be. Or an oversight, you know, it happens. This whole procedure shouldn't take me but tear down and back together. I'm not moving fast. I'm not trying to rush this job. It's not a difficult job, but you know, there's a lot of pieces, and there's a lot of things that you could put together wrong, or kind of absent-minded, not think, or miss a detail, and it could cause some serious damage. There's a lot of moving parts on this thing. Okay, I'll get the rest of these in, no sense in boring you guys. Okay, so I got the first torque sequence done. So what we're going to do now is put in the new connector tubes. These have these two little detent balls here. Those go into a groove in the hole to line it up perfectly and to keep it from twisting when you're tightening up your fuel line. So what I'm going to do is put a little light coat of oil on here, just on the O-ring itself, and slide them in there, and then we'll put the nuts on. I'm going to clean up the nuts real good, the interior, exterior of them, both sets of threads, and then we'll get them torqued down. Listen, I'm not a 6'7" common rail pro, so I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there who can do this much faster than I can, much better than I can, with better techniques than I'm doing, so don't use this as a how-to. You know, entertainment only. You know, there's things I could be doing wrong, and, you know, I'd hate for someone to do what I'm doing and cause themselves trouble. So, just a disclaimer here, just make sure that you're watching this for entertainment, not because you want to watch how to do it, because I have no training on this or nothing, and this could be very expensive if you mess something up. But this is my truck, and I'm going to take the chance that I can do it and be okay. So let's get at it. Once I get them in there and I know they've snapped in, I like to give it a little twist and listen. I want to hear those detents hitting on both sides of that keyway. That way I know I'm in the right place. So now let's put the nuts on, we'll torque them down. Okay, next I've got my retaining nuts all cleaned up. It's very important to make sure you get all the crud off of them, because as you go to put this in, you don't want anything to fall down into around the tube, around the outside, that would damage that O-ring, or fall in here to the center and get some crud down in here, which would ultimately end up in your injector. Now, I don't like to put these together dry, so this is nothing more than a cap off a can of starting fluid or PV blaster or something. Just put a little light motor oil in there. That way all of it has oil on it. And then I like to start them in here because I want a good I want a good torque on it, good even torque, and I don't want it to be dry on them threads. I don't want it overly soaked. You saw how I held it up for a little bit and let it drip off. Again, this is just my preference of doing it. I don't know what the manual would say, but I like to just make those threads just a little bit lubricated with oil. It's not going to hurt anything because it'll derail, you know, like drip off because it's gravity. It's setting sideways, horizontal, whatever you want to call it. But we'll get them all in there, and then we'll go through and torque them. That way it gives all that oil a chance to, all the excess can drip off. So let me get all these in here and I'll bring it back. I have to get the torque spec, and this will be a different torque wrench. This one I was using here is inch-pounds only, inch-pounds and Newton meters. I'm going to need something larger than this one. I have 4 torque wrenches, and believe it or not, that's not enough. I need yet another one, but someday I'll get that. But let me get all these in, and we'll torque them down. Okay, so I got all the injectors in. They're all torqued to spec. All the connector tubes are in. The nuts that hold them in are torqued. And I didn't go over how to do that because I'm not a Cummins pro. I'm not. I've only been in a handful of these common rails, and I don't want to tell somebody wrong or something I'm not experienced with. So if I had better feeling about it, about what I was doing, I'd share it, but I really don't. So I don't want to you know, make it sound like I'm telling you how to do it, because that's not the case. I'm just fixing this truck myself the best way I know how. But anyways, now we're going to move on to the rockers. I want to make sure that all my push rods are seated down in the tappet where they belong, and that's a pretty simple thing to do. And we're going to set the rockers on. I will tell you this, the sequence that I do for torquing the injectors and the torque tubes is a multi-step. It's not put one in, torque it down. It's put the injectors in and torque them to a spec, put the tubes in, torque them to spec, and go back to the injectors, up a little bit more, and then back to the tubes and finish it off. And then recheck everything. That's what I do, but I'm not going to go through the process with you, because like I said, I'm not a pro. You know, there's a lot of guys out there who know a lot more about these than I do. You're probably better off to find one of them. But I'm going to get the rockers on. We'll get the valve cover seal back on with the electrical connectors, get all these on, and we're going back together. Okay guys, it's all back together here. Maybe some of you were watching, because I actually live streamed while I was putting it together. And it took me a few hours. I was chatting a good bit too, but we got it all back together now. So I've already started it as I did in the live stream. So there she is, running on her own again. All 6 cylinders. I stuck the scanner on it. Did a balance, make sure all the cylinders were hitting even, looked at the injector rail pressure, make sure all that was good. Everything looks good, it's running good, sounds fantastic, no lights on, no nothing, so hopefully we're good to go, because we're getting ready to take this on vacation. I'm going to let it run just a little bit to warm up the oil. I'm going to drain the oil, change it. I got a new filter and Rotella oil to put in, and I'm going to give it a good looking over, make sure I don't have any lights out or anything weird, but it's running pretty good. I'm pretty happy. Bunch of crickets around here, tons and tons of crickets. Can't see them, but man, they're just going crazy around here. As soon as I walked through here, they all jumped. Look at all them crickets. Wonder what they're doing over here today. That's kind of weird. But anyways, I'm going to get the oil changed, and we're going to call this one done and ready to go. Another victory. Fumbling through trucks, as I like to say. another one finished up. We're going to be on vacation for a week, so hopefully this truck treats us well. I'm taking the block off dummy plugs with me and the wrenches and all that, so if I do have troubles I could change an injector on the road, and I'm taking a couple of my original good injectors with me just in case I end up with maybe a bad one out of the bunch or something like that. So anyways, I'm gonna leave you with that. If you guys like what we're doing, give us that thumbs up. We appreciate it. Leave your comments down below, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.